And first of all, again, thank you for your presence. Thank you for being here. I hope this will be a stimulating debate that I have the pleasure of moderating. My name is Ricardo Miguel. I'm the head of the NESC Brussels Hub office, which represents the biggest research and technology organizations in Portugal. And we have about more than 2,000 people, which for us is quite a big number, and state-of-the-art infrastructures, etc. So this is a very, very central discussion for us as well. And the goal of today's session is to explore how we can collectively build a narrative towards an EU innovation ecosystem to reach net zero, right? So this is within the wider scope of the Science Business Conference, but this is a session that is sponsored by CERN and the Attract project in particular. And in that sense, we have with us Marc from CERN. Mar is the head of CERN's Site and Civil Engineering Department, and she will give the motto for discussion with a 10-minute presentation. And then we will structure the discussion in 4 key areas. We will address ecosystems, research and innovation infrastructures, technology infrastructures. There's many a diversity of infrastructures to discuss and their role, and so it's also a focus, being CERN one of them. Education, skills and talent, which we have just heard the centrality of that theme, and funding and policy, of course. And to do that, we have an excellent set of invited panelists here, discussants, I would call it, because this is a roundtable without presentations except for the Mar presentation. So we have, besides Mar, we have, and following the order in the program, Doris Schroeker, who I think everyone knows. You have all the names in front of you. We have Louise Drogul, Wim de Kinderen, Pedro Rocha, Marc Mawhinney, Saija Hollmén, Andy Kerr, Muriel Attané, and just arrived and welcome Francesco Molica from the Joint Research Center. So without further ado, please, Mar, you can prepare your presentation. And just before you do that, I just would like to ask all the speakers and discussants here to keep their answers objective. There's a lot of people that are going to chip in the discussion, but let's also create an engaging discussion. So when you have something to comment about what someone said, just please do this. Like, you know, if you've participated in the commission meetings, you know that's the that's what people do. So do this. And finally, this is a push-to-talk micro. So when you... It's very, very important that you push to talk so that not only us here are hearing, but also the people online and the recording. And then you turn it off, because otherwise we hear you breathing, and that's not what we want. So that's it for now. Thank you for your attention, and let's get on with it. Mar, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, everybody, for listening to these first 10 minutes, which I hope it will be an interesting opening for this session. So I'm here today. I am a scientist that has worked at CERN for the last 30 years. And it's only since a couple of years that I am the head of the Site and Civil Engineering Department. And this is an interesting moment at CERN for this function because we are planning the future. And I come here today to discuss about a concept that I think many of the key ingredients have been already discussed, and they came out during the plenary session, so I'm extremely happy about that. So just a quick reminder of what CERN is, if anyone doesn't know. So it's one of the biggest infrastructures, research infrastructures in Europe, is in any case the world's biggest laboratory for particle physics. This is an international organization funded by today 23 member states. We are about 3,600 employees. But I think the most important component is that there is about 12,000 people that come to do science at CERN every year from member states and non-member states. And this is because we have cooperation agreements with more than 35 countries, in addition to the member states. Our budget is about 1,200 million Swiss francs every year, and most of this budget goes to the core program, which is to do particle physics. And what is particle physics today is the branch of science that wants to understand the most fundamental particles and laws in the universe. And we do this with a complex of accelerators. And you see a picture of the Large Hadron Collider. I don't know if you can see the airport in the bottom line, so it gives you a little bit the dimension of the infrastructure. And within this infrastructure, we have the accelerators, we have particle detectors that will register the collisions in those particle accelerators. And another one of our pillars of research is computing, because we have to analyze the data that comes out from those collisions. So CERN, being one of the largest infrastructures in Europe and kind of in the world, it has also an important component to give back to society. And I think is our Director General, Fabiola Gianotti, which is, this is the second term, so already about 10 years ago, explained and said very clearly that CERN had a commitment to become an environmentally aware scientific laboratory. And this, of course, it touches many aspects of the organization. Of course, the scientific program, but also touches on knowledge expansion, how we want to do this, how we want to become better, how we want to reduce costs, how we want to engage with the community. And of course, CERN is a lab for peace. So it's also about science diplomacy. This translates in many ways, and this is very, very real, from having energy panels that look at every watt consumed at CERN, from reporting all our environmental data and our targets every couple of years. And a very important document that we have produced in year 2021 is what we call the Master Plan of CERN 2040. What it means how do we want CERN to expand, to develop, to do science in the future. And when thinking about that, there are two components of that discussion. The first one is, of course, is what is the science we want to do? But as another part which is important in the discussion is how do the site of CERN has to evolve to expand these infrastructures. And we thought quite a lot, and at the end, we are not different than anybody else. From a small village to a big city to a big company, we thought that when we expand the science and our scientific program, we want to do it with or along 4 pillars, which is looking at the environment. This is a very big word, but this is something that we want to do when we look at the future. Taking care of urbanism. CERN is a very big site, and we want to densify, to optimize the way we use the space. Of course, landscaping and all the links to biodiversity, and very, very important also mobility. I will give you in the next slides some numbers so you understand why this is a challenge for us, which after all is the same challenge than any other city in Europe. So CERN's Green Village, this is the value proposition to society, and you will understand in the next slides what do I mean by Green Village. First of all, you know that CERN is a place where science is made by collaborating, because we have many, many member states. Our projects are so challenging that there is no single country that could do them alone, either because of competencies or finances. So collaborating is in our DNA. Something important you see at the bottom, a little bit of a cartoon of what CERN is today if you don't look at the science we do, but if you look at CERN more like a city. So we have about 700 buildings on site. We have about 64 kilometers of roads. We have about 25,000 movements of people every day coming to CERN to work or moving from building to building or facility to facility. So we have to manage a fleet of many hundreds of cars. We have 400 hectares of land in CERN and outside CERN that we have to manage. We have 70 kilometers of technical galleries with services for energy, computing, fibers, and so on. So there is an incredible amount of resources, not only on people, but also on infrastructure that we have on site, and we have to manage according to those principles I just mentioned. And something which is very important to us is we are a place where decision-making is very agile, because we, by nature, do fundamental science, and being able to change and being able to decide is important to us, is part of our culture. And on top of that, it is a neutral place today. CERN is an international organization, is a lab that was built after the war to make sure that scientists from everywhere in Europe and in the world could collaborate. So this is part of how we do science. So what is Green Village? Very important, I can't forget this. In addition to having all this infrastructure and this way of working, we do have in this Green Village this idea of getting projects in touch with young people. This is the educational part of CERN. And at CERN, we have a very special space, which is called Idea Square. We call it the innovation space at CERN, where we welcome about 600 students every year. I think a fantastic metric for the activity happening there is that there are about 20,000 coffees consumed in this space at CERN per year. And these students, they work per year in about 90 different projects based on CERN technologies, but linking CERN technologies to the SDGs. And what is very relevant in this way of working is that these students are not physics students. Every group is a combination of students that could have competencies on engineering, on design, on medicine, on social sciences, and this is what it makes Idea Square a very interesting place. So what is Green Village after all? We have this idea of the need of expanding CERN, and we do have challenges like everybody else. The ones we have identified, because we think that the problem has to come first and not the solution, is that when thinking of expansion, we have to look at the smart energy, green mobility, waste collection, urban analytics, office space management, very much linked to density optimization of space, and of course, environmental monitoring. So these are the challenges that we want to tackle. And basically, what we are going to do is to open the CERN site to anyone that wants to collaborate with us, not on particle physics, but in any of these projects. So basically, what we are looking for is people that has ideas, sustainable solutions at a level TRL 4 or 6, and that they need a place to test it. They need a site to test it, and we will open the doors and help with infrastructure and with expertise at CERN. It's absolutely, of course, a requirement that these projects have to be done in a realistic time scale and that they need this type of environment to succeed. So, couple of examples, just very quickly. This is an initiative that we are ramping up. We have been working a little bit on the, let's say, the legal aspects, organizational aspects in 1 year. And today we have some examples already. This is a quite representative example because it's a project about air quality monitoring, something that is very relevant today. And we are doing this with universities that do work already in one of the CERN experiments, in the Atlas experiment, which is the largest of all. And by taking the technologies they use to do readout of very fast electronics for particle detection, they will do this for air monitoring on using, of course, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and we will open the site, install those monitors, those sensors, and compare that data with more conventional data and try to see if this is a way to go. Something which is also important is the synergies of this initiative with other EU-funded projects which are currently at CERN. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the ATTRACT project. ATTRACT is basically a partnership with 6 of the biggest research infrastructures in Europe, with other universities, business and law school. And basically, they try to solve the gap between having a good idea from basic science and how that idea can be transported to society. So ATTRACT is there to fill that gap. And just to give you, again, a couple of concrete examples, you see at the bottom 2 projects which are basically funded and being in operation today thanks to ATTRACT, which is these 3D printed smart pies for monitoring work quality, on integrating air pollution sensors with drones. So these are projects that are being funded by ATTRACT with the help of the Commission. So I think I'm going very quickly. This is not the only initiatives that link CERN with environmental sustainability. A standard way of working at CERN is obviously always linking the technologies we do for particle physics with society. And there is an internal call where we look for the technologies that have a quiet and fast translation into areas like renewable energy, transportation, climate change, sustainability in science. So we have currently about 8 projects which are funded by this Technology Transfer Fund, looking for how some technologies can have an impact on society. So I am finalizing saying that I think EU funding in this context, in this initiative, is absolutely fundamental, because first of all, it helps to foster R&D&I collaborations for technologies that will address systemic problems. In addition, is a very sure way of having high risk and high reward technologies beyond going business as usual, and this is exactly what we look for. So basically the message I wanted to pass today is that we are ready to put at service of the European Commission, but of course to many other partners in Europe, our know-how, our expertise, and our infrastructure to try to achieve the net zero goals in Europe. Thank you.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. Yes. Very interesting presentation. And, well, this is an ecosystem. And what I would like to start by challenging my fellow discussants here is to discuss exactly the problem of connectivity between the different parts of the ecosystem, between the different stakeholders of the ecosystem. And then how that can help or not to translate from lower TRLs to higher TRLs up to market, which is the urgent need that we just heard in the plenary session that we need to address by all the speakers. So, Doris, I'll start with you. Why not? Well, this is one ecosystem. Europe is made of dozens, hundreds of ecosystems. We have an issue to deal with connectivity within ecosystems and between ecosystems. So I'll pose you not one but 2 questions. What do we need to ensure connectivity within ecosystems and ensure that we have technologies being reaching industry level and the market and the needed technologies and the green tech that we are focused on today to reach net zero? And also, can regions do it alone? Can ecosystems do it alone? Or how do we reach a coherent EU ecosystem? So just a few initial ideas. Don't worry, you don't need to solve the whole of the world's problems in one answer, and then we'll continue the debate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for this question and for the challenge you're putting me in front of. I think, I mean, we all have a principal understanding of what an ecosystem is. It's bringing different partners with different backgrounds to each other. If I have a quick answer to your question, I think what makes the connectivity is the purpose of the ecosystem. And from a formal perspective, of course, we have definitions at European level. You asked about a European ecosystem, or what are national ecosystems or regional ecosystems. So we have different ways of looking at it. We speak about innovation ecosystems. Myself, I'm in DG R&I, but we are working a lot with the industrial ecosystem definition, which we have now in the industrial strategy. And I was also wondering whether we shouldn't speak about technological ecosystems because they are cross-cutting. So there are many ways of seeing that. What I find fascinating in your example is that it is a focal point of an organization, a place, a purpose to bring partners together. And I think that you see also reflected in the instruments we are using, like Horizon Europe, for example, where we have partnerships, where we bring explicitly together industry or universities or research and technology organizations and civil servant, civil service and citizen representatives for reaching very concrete objectives. And with the net zero ambition, I think we have concrete objectives and to bring partners together in different ways. And that's the ambition we have also with the instruments we have at European level.
Thank you very much. And I take this opportunity to welcome Hélène Chraye. So thank you for coming and for joining us. I will not pose an immediate question to you. I'll give you a couple of minutes to settle down. But I would actually go for our ecosystem representatives, because you've mentioned something that is very, very crucial here, which is the purpose and the role of orchestration, right? So I would like to challenge Wim, for example, who leads or is at the Brainport and heads the office here in Brussels in representation of Brainport as well. Brainport is an ecosystem orchestrator, right? What does it take for Brainport to be a functional net zero ecosystem, Wim?
My director would tell you it's quite simple, and it requires a lot of coffee drinking between people.
Well, CERN does that a lot, apparently.
20,000, well, we have the same slide, maybe. I have to say that we have the advantage of being a rather small region. But apart from that, I think I can say that Brainport Eindhoven is huge in the industries we're strong in. And that is, we are very famous today for semicon, but we're also strong in photonics, etc. Earlier today, timing is never a coincidence, a report was published by the Rabobank in the Netherlands that stated that Brainport Eindhoven is one of the 2 front runners in the Netherlands on the transition towards a sustainable industry. And I think that is due to the close collaboration that we set up daily between all the players in the Triple Helix collaboration, basically. We do that on high-tech manufacturing. That's what we are all about. Mr. Ehler was mentioning the need for private R&D and that it's going down. Well, I can say that in our region, it's not going down, it's going up constantly. It represents more than 7% of regional GDP. More than 50% of Dutch patents originate from Eindhoven, and 25% of private R&D is based in our region. And this leads us to a truly place-based innovation ecosystem, as we have to call it in the Brussels buzzwords these days, which I don't like, by the way. The reason is, I think, and we can apply that also in the issue of circularity or net zero ambitions, is the fact that large OEM companies play really a driving role. A company like ASML, I think I don't need to explain anymore what ASML is really pushing the sustainability issue into its value chain. Philips Healthcare is already doing circularity by design since ages. They're refurbishing their scanners, etc. So this is really in the DNA of what we work, and Brainport Development is basically the organization which is this daily ecosystem orchestrator, bringing together all these players. And from a cross-technology perspective, I think Mr. Ehler again made a very important remark that it's more about value chains instead of in the industry clusters. We really have to think cross-technology, but we set up programs. And as a regional development agency, today, we are actually more and more in the business of setting up national innovation programs. We are at the origin of Photon Delta, which is now the national cluster on photonics. We have started a project which is the battery competence cluster, which since this spring is a national program on battery competences. So this is the scale we need. So as a regional development agency, we are playing this national role, and more this is of course also growing into a European role that you have as a regionally based ecosystem orchestrator, because in order to realize the speed and the impact we need on net zero, for example, I think this is the way to go, and we could be an inspiration, hopefully, for many, because we need all of you to work on that, because we may be strong, but we cannot do it on ourselves, and that's also not our goal. So this is an open invitation for everybody with complementary expertise, of course, to work with us.
Then that's very interesting. Let me just follow up on that and say that you've mentioned something that is related with the question I posed to, well, a lot of things, the question I posed to Doris, but you've mentioned that you're a regional development agency that works nationally. So you can't do it alone. So what defines what is in your ecosystem and what is outside of your, what defines collaboration? What defines value chain?
We start taking these initiatives because the majority of the industry or on the research capacity on these technologies is based in the Eindhoven region. So we think we have a right to play. And quite soon, these days, it has been different before maybe, but we realized that we should not confine ourselves to the region. So we need the scale that ends on a Dutch level, which on a funding perspective as a regional development agency is, by the way, contradictory because we are not a national agency. So that is something for the future to reflect upon maybe. But as long as we exist, and the strength that we have today dates from 30 years, it's the result of 30 years work, of course, we never call ourselves a region. Now today you call yourself an innovation ecosystem, but we always have defined ourselves as a functional region. We do not want to be limited by administrative borders, which somebody else in another department once set to come to the NUTS indication, for example. We are a NUTS 3 level, actually. That's how small we are. So we look outward by definition. The key point for us is that there's a recent TNO study, by the way, Muriel will know it, that's talking about control points in the value chain. And that study talks about European control points, of course, in an open strategic autonomy perspective. But I think a number of issues and campuses and research centers such as CERN or our campuses are key of that. Some regional control points or some control points of a value chain need to be kept in the region. And from that moment on, I think we are really willing and actually looking really today to look beyond the region to realize the Brainport growth outside of the region, actually. That's something that will come up later in the debate, but we cannot do it alone anymore, so we really need the rest. Yeah.
Yes, a lot to unpack there as well. Marc, you've used your the secret code.
I have. I've used the secret code, and you've allowed me to get out of my straitjacket as an European Investment Bank representative, because my experience with this was before I joined the European Investment Bank. I worked for Oxford University for 5 years, and I was given the opportunity to travel the world setting up technology transfer offices. And it was very, very interesting because what we saw as a pattern was that places that could move this forward, and it's quite difficult to move this forward, I have to say, is they had a center of excellence, technology excellence, manufacturing excellence, something like that, something that they could build on. They also had dynamic people, not just the dynamic people who worked for the organization itself, but people around it, bankers, investors, the scientists, the administrators beyond the scientists. All of that needed to be in place as well. And of course, it did need to be supported by the public. But what I would say is that it wasn't a heavy hand support of the public. In that previous discussion that was in the previous room, I think, I can't remember who it was that said it, maybe Anna, but she said you can't regulate into net zero. I don't think you can regulate into an ecosystem. I think the regulation can help, and I don't think you can subsidize into an ecosystem either. Again, the subsidy can help. But the two examples that we've already had are just show you that pattern. I mean, CERN is a center of excellence. Everybody knows about it as a center of excellence. And Eindhoven has a whole bunch of places that are well known at a global level.
Thank you, Marc. That's very interesting, but those ecosystems have players, key players in them that need to exist so that knowledge is produced, so that knowledge is circulated, and so that knowledge is, has an uptake and transfer to the market.
Back to the coffee corner.
I think it goes beyond the coffee corner, because if we ask our colleagues here, for example, from the RTOs or the technical universities, I'm sure you don't just drink coffee, do you? Luis, do you want to tell us? I know that CESAR just very recently launched a what was it called? It was a study on deep tech and entrepreneurship, for example. Right? We all seem to want to have a central place in the ecosystem, and the role of technical universities is important. So, do you want to highlight the key ideas for us, and how do they fit?
Yes. Thank you. So I come from, I'll speak the voice of universities of science and technology specifically here. Well, first of all, when it comes to ecosystems and specifically net zero and sustainability, it's such a huge challenge that and you spoke about purpose earlier, I think our purpose here is sustainability, is net zero, and so we need a collaboration among all stakeholders. Everyone is concerned. Knowledge and learning they're a key part of making change, which is one of the primary missions of universities. Specifically, universities of science and technology, they also have this additional thing that we're at the forefront of research and innovation and scientific discoveries. And we like, rather than saying that we want to be at the center of the ecosystem, we like to say that we sort of act as the glue or as bridges to link the different ecosystems and the different partners of the ecosystems. I think that's a nice way of describing it. And it's also all about people, especially within universities, science and technology or not. It's from students to researchers to professors, it's all about the people. And I think that's also really important to highlight. And it's really important to develop a startup mindset among researchers that will be supported where entrepreneurship is celebrated and where the startup support is easily accessed and where a wider innovation ecosystem is actually present. And it's also kind of a loop as well. I think it's something that universities need to capitalize on a lot more, where you create the talent, you foster that talent to create a startup, to create technology, which then gets commercialized on the market. But we also need to think about the loop where that talent can actually come back and create this network and this ecosystem where these people come back and mentor researchers to keep on having the loop and the ecosystem going. I hope I answered that question with a lot in my mind.
No, that's very, very useful, and I'll get to you, Mar, in just 1 second. But this reminded me something in the preparatory conversation I had with Andy, which was this culture shift that we spoke about, because we have this notion that we develop technology and the technology is needed. But at the end, what Andy and I were talking about was maybe we should start from the problem and start, and so that culture of entrepreneurship might actually help with that. But Andy, do you want to elaborate on how structural change within EIT, Climate-KIC, and some of the best practices you would like to share with us in that sense on related to this culture? I think I would call it a culture problem.
Sure, absolutely. And just for those that don't know, so Climate-KIC's one of the knowledge innovation communities supported originally on a 15-year mandate by the European Institute of Innovation Technology, EIT. And we were set up largely as an economic instrument to support skills, jobs, investment and solution development, so supporting entrepreneurs, so very much in the supply side of the solutions, so building innovation ecosystems between academics, so universities, businesses and entrepreneurs. And we did that by seeding these innovation ecosystems in countries across Europe. And so we're located in 13 different jurisdictions and so on and so forth. Our experience was that you could build these innovation ecosystems very successfully, but that actually that the solutions that emerged from them very rarely scaled at the speed that we needed them to scale to solve Europe's challenges. And so we ended up actually doing a very structural shift to start looking at how do you shape the demand side to enable the solutions to scale across Europe. So that ended up very, very much working with things like the EU mission, so the cities mission, the adaptation mission, the soil mission, around how do you actually start to, what was mentioned before this afternoon, in this afternoon's session, do the system integration, do the market design, so shaping and making markets to allow the solutions to develop into that. But one of the things we noticed very heavily was that what did work in one part of Europe clearly does not work in another. This is not just about the technology. This is also about the social context, the economic context, the cultural context. So actually building that type of entrepreneurial culture is absolutely at the heart of it. I agree, as is your point about, you cannot regulate your way to this. You actually have to incentivize to bring the excitement, the building between business, entrepreneurs, universities. And from what we're also seeing is that we're focusing very heavily on the public authorities who are actually trying to make net zero happen, the local authorities, the municipal authorities, the cities, the regions, because they're the ones who are actually at the what we call the messy middle, actually having to deal with the local politics versus the adoption by citizens versus that's the space where you can really shape the incentives, which if you then have this funnel of innovation, innovative products and services, you can enable, scale, expand rapidly. So that's really the culture shift that we've had to go through to try and deliver on our mandate, which is to support Europe to meet net zero. So.
Extremely interesting, thank you. I'm going to look more in depth into that example after this. Mar, and then I want to go into Muriel, because I want to complement on the other scale of the stakeholder, and also as an area stakeholder. Mar.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also, I think it's a bit complementary what Louis said and what Andy said, because I think also we are discussing here today where there are two components. One is the size of the problem, reaching the net zero, and the second one is the urgency of the problem. And that's where I believe the role of research infrastructures could be key in building these ecosystems. I mean, why? Because Europe is a place in the world where they have a lot of tradition. We do basic science, and that means that we are used to do breakthrough technologies. I mean, you don't discover the Higgs particle by doing just a little bit better. I mean, you have to develop superconducting magnets, superconductive links, the biggest or the more intense vacuum more than in the moon. So we are used to do these breakthrough technologies that you don't do by incremental research. And that's a culture which is unique in Europe. So that, first of all, just helps, to create the right ecosystem. And second, we do have very sophisticated infrastructure. So by combining these two things, they are a key component of a big umbrella that can help create these ecosystems and do have this collective culture which is needed and has been discussed and mentioned by everybody. That's why I really wanted to put back on the table this idea of the research infrastructure, because I think all the components are already there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very relevant topic, which we are going in depth in just a minute. I would challenge Muriel to comment on that as well, and because you represent, I know, 350, 400 RTOs, more than that at the moment, and so an important era stakeholder, and I would say that knowledge translation is at the heart of RTOs. I know that very well. So my specific question to you are the current funding programs at EU level mobilizing the right actors to promote, to stimulate this market uptake towards net zero?
Okay. Maybe I have some remarks on what has been said first, and I will try to answer your question. I think what we hear is that the question of ecosystem, that you can look from very different angle if you are industry, if you are research performer, or even research infrastructure. And what you see is that still on the GIEC, so I'm correcting a little bit, I don't have automatically the same view than Marc on the net zero. The GIEC say that most of the technology for achieving the climate targets are known, but most of them are not mature enough. So I still think incremental research has a lot to offer. What I've seen also is that the EARTOs have done a lot of something similar, especially those which are located in big campus with technical university, OEM, so what you will have the Brainport, Eindhoven, and the campus where you have TNO, EARTOs, and the TU Eindhoven, the TU next to it with the big OEMs on the old Philippe campus. Those guys, they have tried mobility. So what I thought was interesting in your example was the net zero target. So I think on trying to have living labs or test labs being also the location where the ecosystem are striving, this is not new. However, your orientation, I think, was interesting for the net zero. I think what we see, at least in our membership, is that they are asked more and more, and so it's EARTOs, they have labs for research and for technology development. Often those labs sometimes are shared, co-owned with technical universities. They are open to whatever industry wants to come and work on with them. But what you see is that in the past, we were thinking big investment like large research infrastructure like the CERN for scientific. And now what we realize is that for the tech development, the amount of investments necessary are very different from in the past. So before we were having few labs with many equipments. Now when you're looking at, for example, microelectronics, because I have still the example of Wim with ASML, the IMEC clean room is more than 2 billion euro, and the last investments, I think they will go for more than 3 billion euro investments over 30 years, and the last billion has to come really fast in less than 10 years. Meaning that the speed, also for the net zero, for the new value chain, for sustainability, etc., even in tech will require much bigger funding. I think we have some of them in Europe, so I go back to your question for me, Ricardo, but I don't think we have them all, and I think the question will be, how do we orchestrate that the funding that are coming from industry, private investments, from the public at the national level, and with a top-up of EU, maybe after investments from the EIB, or are we going to orchestrate those investments for large research and technology infrastructure, because I think those are coming much more towards also our side, where the investments are much bigger than in the past. How are we going to orchestrate those ones fast enough to compete with the US and China? On microelectronics, it's clear. You have, for example, a program like Digital Europe with the testing and experiment facility. I think you have DGRTD, and here I have two colleagues which are pushing for a discussion on what type of the new platform with technology infrastructure based on example of ETBs or the pilots that was done on aviation. And I think we need to, it's not only the funding, but it's the orchestration of the funding to make sure that it goes into certain industrial value chains and that certain key points, like what Wim was saying, I really, control points. I will keep that wording. The control points for our strategic autonomy are kept in Europe. We're not going to have complete value chain back in Europe. However, which are the control points based on some of the research and technology infrastructure that we want to keep, where the industry will test this type of new technology and invent them sometimes, where are going to be placed, and with what amount of money are we going to be able to pool. But Europe alone is not only EU funding, it's going to be national funds, pooling some of the structural funds, looking at what the EIB can do, but the EIB is a bank, so I like the EIF sometimes a little bit better because they can really go for more investments, not the AAA rating, and the, with research and technology development, loans are very difficult. We have some business model example for that, but they are limited. And I think that's the pooling of these resources to orchestrate very good ecosystem that we already have, so we don't start from nothing.
Very important message. We already have the elements of the ecosystem. we just need to orchestrate them better, which was exactly my first question to Doris. So let's pass on to Hélène. And well, clean energy is at the heart of our climate goals, and there are a set of relatively recent initiatives that are being implemented by the Commission, like the regional innovation valleys and the renewable energy valleys and others. So, Hélène, would you like to go deeper on the impact of these initiatives and the stimulation of net zero ecosystems, and comment on everything else that has been said meanwhile?
Thank you, and apologize again for being late. It was not my intention. It was unforeseen. Yeah, we have been speaking about the infrastructure globally, and I would insist on what Muriel has been saying, because it's extremely important. We should not confuse research and technology infrastructure. They could be in the same location, but they are different animals. And by confusing it, we don't give enough money and enough support to technology infrastructure. And it's a very simple process. We called it, in my previous team, a beauty contest. That if I am having a technology infrastructure and I'm testing medical technologies in and outside countries, it's very easy for me to find the best one and then to invest to buy the best one. And that's how innovative things are leaving the EU. It's simple as that. It's human. But if we don't build enough good technology infrastructure on the core value chains, as Muriel said, then we lose the access to market. And we saw that very clearly. I'm sorry, it's not energy, but we saw that very clearly in medical technologies. We discovered that we cannot produce breathers, syringes, things like that. Basic things. Why? Because innovation we'd had, but the production is no longer here. So I would like to come back now to something else from the beginning, which is the conditions for innovation. The ecosystem could be indeed regional, local, whatsoever, but there is a clear hidden thing, if I can use this clear and hidden wording, in ecosystem. It means the people. If you have an ecosystem with researcher and industry, forget it. You need the people. Otherwise, you produce things which are not adjusted to the needs. If you produce things which are rejected by 20–30% of the population because they cannot access physically, because they cannot access, let's say, IT compliance, because they cannot access financially, then you create discrimination and you have social movements, and it kills the innovation. So if you want that the transition towards clean energy is accepted by people, it's not to convince people, it's to produce something which is matching their needs. And that's very difficult, and that's where science can help. So I come to a condition of ecosystem, which is to provide the scientific tools for an ecosystem. So in the revision of the set plan, we are creating task forces, mixing member states, industries, and also experts on cross-cutting issues. The idea is that every time you want to develop a technology, at any step of the development, you look at these cross-cutting issues, which are circularity, sustainability, adjustment to citizens' needs, digitalization impact, skills needed. So you don't go to something which looks extremely nice, but unrealistic. And science is good enough in EU to provide with this type of tools, modeling, guidelines, ideas, but it needs first to be approved as such, that we understand that. And we stop, for instance, doing things that elderly people cannot use because they are targeted only for kids. Or to do things that disabled people cannot use. Let me find 1 minute to give you one example of this, not in energy. But have you looked recently to communication people, these wonderful people who are writing in white on green? 18%, 15% of the population face problems to read that. Did that cross the mind of these communication people, even in the Commission? Huh? So every time I have to say, please, I cannot read it. I'm not stupid. I just cannot read it. So we need to adjust the technologies to the people. Otherwise, we go to a failure. And the last message I would like to pass is that the magnitude of the transition towards clean energy is enormous. If we don't find solutions for saving materials, saving fresh water, it's not possible. It's just not possible. So the condition of circularity, we have put it compulsory in all the test beds we have developed. In all the steps of the test beds, you need to check whether what you are proposing will be fully recyclable, using less materials, critical materials. But even sand is becoming a critical material now. Adjusted to people. So that's on the innovation ecosystem. Empowerment of citizens is core for us. And what we do in the hydrogen valleys and now in the renewable energy valleys, it is to build on the people, to make them involved so that they accept, because there always are consequences. You put a windmill in my garden, I'm not happy. But if it cuts down the cost of electricity, I may be happier. So this is the approach to involve the people and not the industry, and not ask the industry to tell what the people want. The people can perfectly tell what they want. I mean, usually they're not stupid. Huh? So that's also the aim of the missions, for instance. So the regional innovation, the renewable energy valleys and the hydrogen valleys are built on the idea that there are a lot of possibility of regional and local ecosystems on energy. It's not only a big network. You can also have cells constituting a network. And that's a complementary approach. And to conclude with a very tough remark, I don't think that in the EU we have enough energy resources domestically to stop using everything. Even geothermal here and wind there and ocean here and so on and so on. We need to build on all. Otherwise, we will continue to import energy. Sorry, a bit long.
Including nuclear?
Including material for nuclear.
Just following up on the question during the plenary session, which I found very pertinent from my friend there, Massimo. There's a lot of comments, and that's very good, but I will go to Francesco now. Francesco, there's a lot of very
Provocative.
very deep implications into all you said. I agree. Well, that doesn't really matter at the moment, but I agree completely with your comments. And I know that the JRC has been working on the path of on paths of coordination of ecosystems and many of the implications that Hélène has just mentioned. So one of them is, for example, disparities. That's my specific question. Please feel free to comment on any disparities that this place-based approach that we use can cause across the EU as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I wanted to jump on the question to Muriel because it's also pretty pertinent and linked to your question regarding the EU funding instruments and whether they are targeting the right stakeholders. I wanted to perhaps provide 2 or 3 ways to see at this and perhaps identify 2 or 3 challenges that in my view are still there that we need to address when it comes to how EU funding programs are indeed supporting innovation ecosystems and stakeholders that are participating in innovation ecosystems. The first one is clearly whether, first of all, let me say that we still have not enough evidence about it because we should look at the characteristics of the current participants in these programs. We now have data. We have some pretty comprehensive and detailed databases run by RTD as well as DG Regio when it comes to cohesion funds, but there still need to be more empirical work in analyzing this data and understanding indeed where the characteristics of the beneficiaries that have been funded up to now, they can allow us to tell that we are clearly supporting the right, stakeholders. Anyway, when it comes to participation, I see the first challenge is that there's a bit of incumbent effect, meaning that if you look at the stakeholders that are participating, and even not only the applicants, but all the more those who are then eventually getting the funding, they tend to be more or less the same. So there may be an issue for new entrants, because there are out there stakeholders that are perhaps less well-equipped to participate in funding programs, not that they do not have a priori the characteristics to get a grant from an EU funding program. So we need to look at this. The second challenge, in my view, is that in the selection of projects, and this applies particularly to cohesion policy funds, there's still a bit of risk aversion in public authorities. So they tend to award projects that might not be necessarily the most innovative ones, because there's still some sort of fear of awarding projects that might fail. But failure is indeed, when we look at the future challenges, failure is what we need to incorporate in our culture, especially when it comes to emerging technologies. And, so this is, and the third challenge, of course, is fragmentation. So we have many EU funding instruments targeting, aiming at the same or directing at the same priorities, objectives. And we still need to perhaps work a little bit more in terms of how to synergize or coordinate these instruments. Coming to the issue of regional disparities, of course, not all regional innovation ecosystems are unfortunately equal. So there are regional innovation ecosystems that are pretty much advanced with very much proactive stakeholders. There are regional innovation ecosystems where still coordination among stakeholders is very weak, where the capacity of the stakeholders is weak, where the capacity of the public authorities is extremely weak, and the application of the smart specialization strategies during the period 2014-2020 has clearly demonstrated this. So it was, for some regional authorities, unfortunately, it was just a box-ticking exercise, and we have now many also studies on it. There's abundant literature on it. And this points to the fact that we still need to indeed see, we cannot, let's say, speak for all, we cannot treat all in an equal way, but we need to also think of those regional economic systems, innovation systems that are still lagging behind, and what to do in order to make sure that they can bridge their gap with those who are leading.
I want to come back to a lot of that if we have time when we get to the funding part. Now I'm going to go for a last round in this ecosystems component, and I would like to get to infrastructures in more depth. So I don't really know who was first, and I know there are people who haven't spoken. So I will go first for the people who haven't spoken and ask Pedro and Saija if to add. I know Pedro runs also a system orchestrator, and in Portugal, focused on manufacturing sector, and it's also a digital innovation hub. So Pedro, I would like to challenge you to talk us a little bit about how you align the multi-level dimension of all that you do, because in the same vein as Wim, but in a little bit different fashion, you have that challenge. And Saija, to you, I would like to return to the question of and maybe bridge already with another issue that we have to touch upon, which is the nature of the ecosystems that we are creating. From your point of view, as a specialist in built environments, and what are the key ideas? We need cross-disciplinarity, and cross-disciplinarity, this debate is also present. So I would like to hear from you, what are the key elements that you see are important?
Thank you so much. Sorry, I am a little bit with my throat a little bit fuzzy, but I would like to return to one of your first questions, which is how these ecosystems are built or brought to life. And it is purpose, and we should translate purpose as need plus a vision. And this is the context of PRODUTECH. PRODUTECH is a cluster organization. It is focused and it is led by production technology companies, and it links to the manufacturing industry, read it, all sectors of the manufacturing industry and users of production technologies, which can be also utilities that use technologies that were originally developed for the manufacturing industry, and of course another key element of this triangle are of course R&D organizations. So in a nutshell, we are a national cluster organization. We act locally and regionally because it is in the regions and in the locals where the companies are, where the R&D organizations are. And of course, we also have an international intervention. When I say international intervention, is that when we think about production technologies in Portugal, we see that 80% of our production is for exports. In that sense, internationalization, not only the business, but also the internationalization of innovation sources, knowledge, and also towards the deployment of demonstration facilities, it's also really, really important in our mind. So we as a cluster, we act at 4 levels. Cooperation, because there is no ecosystem without cooperation. We act at the promotion of R&D and innovation. We act at the level of visibility and internationalization, and we act at the level of intelligence. And regarding reaching net zero industry, in my mind, Europe has a key positioning that should be leveraged. First of all, it has excellent R&D infrastructures and has excellent R&D capabilities in terms of industrial sustainability technologies. Secondly, it still retains and shall reinforce the footprint of the manufacturing industry that in fact European manufacturing industry has its competitive basis on innovation. Thirdly, it has orchestrators that link all these organizations, not only at regional, national, but also cooperate at European level. And fourth, it has sound policy efforts and initiatives towards a net zero industry. So in that sense, and in my mind, what should be the proposals for us to forward or to put forward a net zero industry? First of all, we should leverage the creation of new ecosystems where there are voids, but we should also consolidate these innovations ecosystems that has these capabilities. And I will reinforce the consolidation of the existing ones and leveraging them. Secondly, to foster a systemic approach towards innovation. It is innovation but it's also to foster adoption. It's also to foster diffusion in order for achieving a net zero industry. And of course, to promote a pipeline projects of initiatives that are to be led by these innovation ecosystems, and to take advantage of the initiatives already in the field. And last but not the least, because a colleague of yours talked about synergies, to establish synergies between policy measures, legislative measures, support mechanisms, and of course, initiatives. But when I say establish synergies, going beyond vision papers, because it is the devil is in the details.
Pedro, we're going to address synergies at a later stage. It's a huge issue. We could make a 3-day conference on it and still, I mean, they've been doing it for years and they still haven't solved it. But so Saija, shortly if you can, and then we'll. Thank you.
Shortly, that's a challenge. Thank you. I'm from Aalto University. My own field is humanitarian architecture. So I look at this reality from the point of view of built environment, but quite holistically actually, because, well, Aalto, as you may or may not know, is a combination of science, technology, business, arts, and creative practices. And all of these have been talked here about in beautiful synergy. And I'd like to come back to what Dr. Hélène said about systemic integration. I think we all can agree that this is very much needed. I would like to draw or come back to the big picture in the sense that we are quite Eurocentric in this discussion here today now. My field being humanitarian architecture, I mean, everything is humanitarian, of course, but if you look at the global scale, if we look at the European ecosystem to reach net zero, I think we should ask at what cost? How do we acquire the raw materials, and where do we dump our waste? If we do not look at the low and middle income countries in that sense, that are we really seeing what is the cost of that production? Do we respect the rights of the indigenous cultures? Do we go and excavate on their lands where they're relying on hundreds and thousands of years? To what extent do we destroy the environment that we're so proudly announcing to save by digging out of those raw and rare materials and then dumping our own waste to the backyards, which happen to be the countries that simply do not have the means nor capacity to deal with it? In the end, they will end up in oceans, and they come back to the ecosystem and to the very food that we eat. So how much of that real cycle are we looking at on a global level? This is a very closed system, and Europe is a tiny little bit on this planet. Yes, we might want to identify ourselves as thought leaders, and in many, many cases we are. We have this beautiful and fabulous and fantastic research infrastructures, which others may not have. But at what cost? Are we leaving someone behind? We're leaving the majority of the world behind. And we are doing damage if we do not see our responsibility in the preserving or destroying the environment of those who cannot deal with them themselves.
Thank you. And also from the point of view of skills attraction and development, the international dimension is quite important. And if we weren't in Brussels, I would say that we just look outside and we have a proof of climate change. But no, it's Brussels, so it's normal. But so, and yeah, I know you really want to talk, Louise, as well, but we have to go into infrastructures, okay? So sorry about that. And I would like to go on with and get back to you, Doris. Very, very concretely, is there a comprehensive approach to infrastructures at Commission level? And I know that there is a focus on technology infrastructures in your unit, so how can they best help us reach net zero?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this. I think infrastructures which help and which are part of innovation ecosystems in a wider sense are very, very important. And we see that they play a role. For research infrastructures, we've had now an established policy as well, now with even a set of instruments for a while. On technology infrastructures, and Hélène referred to it already, so the need for the industry to innovate, and we all know that there are weaknesses in Europe's industrial fabric to take up. You mentioned also the link then to missions and partnerships and the international context and how we do it. So if we want our industry, and is in particular the small and medium-sized enterprises, the many who cannot afford as well systematic long-term research and innovation, if we want to offer them access to knowledge, access to technology, access to testing things, then I think infrastructures have a place. There are infrastructures. I mean, we're not starting from scratch. What I don't see yet, and I think this is also why we have a mandate for that, is we don't have a systematic approach on the technology infrastructure side. It's fragmented. It's national initiatives. It is initiatives by RTOs or universities themselves. We have strategies at European level, but even those are fragmented. We have open innovation testbeds which focused on materials in different areas, and they have a history in particular for health materials. Hélène was at the origin of that. We worked together at the time as well. We have the digital innovation hubs and a lot of different initiatives on that side. We have in microelectronics thinking about infrastructures and broadening the approach as well. And we know that investments are looming and are important, and they are big. So this is also why we would like to work with the member states and with also the representatives to work on that part of the ecosystem. And it's an ecosystem on its own as well, because what we see is as well, and there is a similar approach in the research infrastructure side. There's a need for complementarity of putting things together to see as well where is the right thing, where are the investments, and then who is willing to go ahead, and maybe has an ecosystem at hand to provide a first business case. I think one of the challenges, but specifically on the technology infrastructure side, is the challenge of having a business case, having enough SMEs. And this goes beyond the regional level. So this is a bit where we have some activities which we are now starting very much on the analytical side at the moment, but we hope that very fast, also with the experience from what exists already, including the experience from research infrastructures, to turn that into strategies. Aviation is already thinking about that. On the materials side, we see already the need to do something. Microelectronics is already, and really at something I don't see yet is on the net zero side or on the circularity side. I know individual organizations or so, but I think we are far from speaking about an ecosystem in that area.
But isn't it embedded across? Isn't it transversal?
It is transversal, but this is why I said purpose before, because I think that the ideal what we have is a network of networks, an ecosystem of ecosystems, which can be interconnected with maybe a dynamic way of having interfaces. This is why we speak about innovation ecosystems, industrial ecosystems, technology have their own ecosystems, but in the end, it's all somehow interlinked. And even single organizations, single RTOs, or what you spoke about, what you want to offer as well at CERN, starts to create interdisciplinary approaches or broader approaches. So I think there is a lot of dynamic. So I think governing that dynamic, that I see a bit the challenge of the future.
For the sake of time, I'm going to go to the audience for an intermediate period of questions and then come back to us if there are questions in the audience. Yes, there are apparently a lot. Okay, so. Here in the front, I have one question here on the fourth chair. Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your all your presentations and very interesting remarks. I'm Carl Bonafumura from France Université, the French Rectors Conference. And hearing what some of you said about the imbalance in some regions between innovation ecosystems, or about the need to develop an ecosystem, of ecosystems for the research infrastructures. I was wondering whether European universities alliances are on your radars, so to speak, because some of them have already developed strategies in order to disseminate models of innovation ecosystems which integrate, for instance, industries, which integrate business companies, of course, research organizations, and some of them have also developed integrated model of research infrastructures. I could mention at least 2 universities alliances. Would you say that they are a concern of yours already as a possible way of creating a kind of standardization, the word was used in the plenary session, of ecosystems, innovation ecosystems, and also perhaps making up for the imbalance that may exist in Europe between existing innovation ecosystems?
Thank you for your question. Do you want to direct it to someone in particular, or I'm just going to challenge?
It could be to Mr. Molica, or to Mrs. Schroeker, as far as infrastructures are concerned.
All right, thank you so much. Let's get another couple of questions. So there is a lady in green, and then there's Massimo.
Thank you. My name is Edith Herzog, and I have a question as a following. For me, the net zero European policy is for all Europeans. And the solutions I have heard are very much the short tail and the mid tail. What's about the long tail of the innovation to get the net zero? Unless we think about them, it's a mission impossible, because the short tail and the mid tail will never ever do it. And I'd like to underline what Saija said, that the 400 million Europeans have to somehow cope with it. So where do you see the long tail of innovation to get to the net zero? And if not, how you can achieve it?
Massimo?
Yeah, I would like to further elaborate on the question from Carl.
Please introduce yourself first.
Yeah, sorry, Massimo Busoli. You called me by name, so I thought
sorry.
everyone
my
knows
fault.
me. You know, so. Massimo Busoli, Director of NTNU, Norwegian University of Science and Technology Liaison Office in Brussels, and former Technology Transfer Manager. So I love innovation by heart.
Not that much, Massimo.
Formerly. Very, very short. I will be very short. Basically, adding on what Carl said. In the brokerage of technologies, in the innovation ecosystem, there is another element that we tend to forget always, which is the brokers of the solutions which are existing at European level, to make sure that they can be easily transferred everywhere. And the Commission in the European Research Area 20 points came out with an interesting proposal, in my opinion, which at the moment looks a bit lagging nowhere, which are the ERA hubs, which are somehow an expansion of the digital innovation hubs, which have been mentioned on the table, but targeting, if you want, more transversally all technologies, which could be also including the net zero technologies and in general them. So when we talk about ecosystem of ecosystems, I think that the ERA hub as a concept could be expanded to try to build this kind of brokerage market of technologies, circulation that can complement also the excellent work that the KICs are already doing, and also, as it was supposed, take inspiration from the model of digital innovation hub, which I think is very good, in my opinion, to pick up the different best practices and transfer them efficiently all over Europe. So to complement on what Carl was saying.
Thank you. So let's get back to the table, and I'll challenge anyone to start answering the 3 questions. I would just say that the ERA hubs also have a very cultural transformation component from my perspective, and also transforming public policy administration in that sense. because not to be limited to administrative borders. And that's a huge proposal from Arabs that I think is worth considering further. Now, to answer these questions, university alliances. Francesco, you were challenged. I'm not sure you are the...
Probably I'm not the best place to answer to this question. I would only like to say a couple of things. First of all, clearly there's a big untapped potential in terms of matchmaking of different ecosystems from which those ecosystems that are lagging behind could draw enormous benefits. There's a recent study from Ron Boschma, Pierre Ballan, and Julia Bachstrogler, so three prominent scholars, saying that, well, finding that probably in terms of complementarities between, you know, the industrial or innovation strengths of each region and putting them together, there's still an untapped potential equivalent to 80%. So, you know, there's a lot to do. And the other thing is that we need to address the root causes of the fact that there are some regions that are clearly lagging behind. And for this, I think we need to make a step back and look at issues that for which then, you know, your solution is the next step, if you know what I mean.
Very good. Anyone, Wim, do you want to come in? Pedro as well? Oh, everyone wants to come in. Right. Right, Wim, go ahead.
If he allows me, I'm gonna revert the question back to the audience, because I think there's somebody in the audience who has part of the answer on the University Alliance and the Arabs, actually, which is Simon from DTU. If he wants to say a word about that. So the university, to respond to your question, I think you're partly right. I mean, if the university alliances are built in the right way, and I think our own university, Technical University of Eindhoven, is part of Eurotech. And as we have together submitted a successful proposal on the Arab testing the pilot concept call, which we are now running. I don't know, Simon, if you can connect both.
Indeed, let's follow up to the long tail and of the long tail question, and you will want to comment on our hubs. All right, and then move on with the discussion. Anyone wants to comment on the long tail? It's Saija. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the question. I think what has already been said, that everything in the end of the day comes back to people. Global solutions to local problems. Every single culture has their own roots and senses of belonging and ways of seeing things. And what works somewhere doesn't work elsewhere. So we need to combine, again, systemic integration of creative thinking, creative industries, creative practices, arts and science coming together. Human sciences, understanding cultures and human nature, because that is inherently who we still are, and even artificial intelligence is being taught on the basis of what we have produced so far, and it can only learn what we teach it, unless what differentiates us from that is that we have that capacity of innovate. And how do we facilitate that innovation, and that capacity is not, it's coming, regulations and facilitation coming together. Both ends are needed, but they need to be culturally adapted for local solutions.
I would like to reinforce that on a long-term vision. The role of research is indeed a part of the role of research. It's not to do only technologies, it is to analyze what will be the future challenges. That's a long time that scientists have been alerted on climate. It's now quite an amount of years that they are alerting on the tapping into the resources of the planet. They are beginning to alert on the fact that the next challenge will be indeed resources, and the further challenge will be whether people will accept it, and social discrimination. So it's a role of science to anticipate and to already look at tools, because it's very nice to have communities, but you need a community on something. So our role is to develop tools to anticipate that and provide to the scientific and engineering communities ways to tackle in advance. Because, of course, research takes 5 to 10 years. You don't invent now. You invent for the next. So when we speak about innovation ecosystem, we should also include tools. And I'm not speaking about meeting people. I'm speaking about scientific tools.
Thank you so much, Hélène. We'll go for Mar, and then I would like to hear I would like to hear some, to address the topic, to go back to people. We've been talking about people all the time, and I would like to address the topic of skilling and reskilling, and that's related also to the University Association's thing. But also, I would like to hear what the stakeholders around the table, namely the RTOs, the technical universities, how do they see that they can address that skilling and reskilling problem? I mean, we've just had a research careers proposal promoted by the Commission. So I'd like to go to both Muriel and Louise in specific, but for example, having as a framework that Wim just commented that the technical needs of people in Eindhoven will double in the next 10 years, and I am assuming this is the same in Portugal, this is the same everywhere. So what in practice is being done, and are the European programs addressing this in the correct way? So I would like to ask you, but Mar, you had a comment, so please.
Yes, I'm sorry, because I'm coming back to something which I found very interesting that Hélène said and insisted, which was this availability of tools to do the right things when you do research, when you do technology, when you do innovation. That goes a little bit in the direction of one of the questions about standardization and equality between different levels of innovative ecosystems. That has a cost. That's the only thing I wanted to say. That has a cost, and if Europe has to integrate that in the way we do innovation, which I'm fully for, someone has to pay the bill. And that was already mentioned in the opening discussion, which is who is taking that cost that is kind of making Europe going slower if you compare to other cultures and another way of doing innovation, like in China. So I think this is very interesting, but it does need a lot of investment indeed. Thank you.
Andy, go on.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just, because we're not so focused on the university side of education anymore, but we are very aware that in the work that we are doing, and it kind of picks up the long tail piece as well, if you're trying to make change happen across multiple places within Europe and beyond, you know, we've ended up seeing there are some sort of set of necessary conditions, one of which is the civic legitimacy. You've got to take people with you because the speed and the scale of the change is so big. You've got to be thinking systemically, and a lot of the challenges we have seen have been where people are bringing forward particular ideas or skills or learning, which is only focusing on one part of the problem, and then actually we're working into complex systems. We've got cascading risks from pandemics, from climate, from geopolitical competition. These things are often not being captured in the foresighting that we are doing effectively. our experience is that you end up having to accept that we do not know exactly how that system is going to evolve. Therefore, you have to end up with experimentation, which means both the research infrastructures have to be pretty nimble, yeah, so that you have to be able to pull together different parts to allow things to just test and learn, but also that it has to be real-world testing, which is what I was really interested in, your comments about using CERN, not just for the particle physics, but actually as a place to go and test and learn, because that's something that we have struggled with in some of the places we are working with. And one of the challenges has been this sense, particularly in public authorities. We were working with one city and they said, we can't use the term experimentation, no? Because our elected officials will not allow us to talk about experimentation, yeah? Because we have to be seen to be spending public money and know what we're doing. Yeah, we can't experiment and fail, we have to know what we're doing. That whole culture is a challenge which needs learning, and that isn't just learning at a university context, that's learning right the way through society in terms of being nimble, being entrepreneurial, understanding that we need to face some of these issues. And that's one of the challenges, I think, for us within Europe, is how do we take it out from the universities into that more wider...
Well, and the EIT Climate-KIC has a program that starts with 12-year-olds, if I'm not wrong. So you are also looking at the long tail on the other side. So picking up on that, Louise, Muriel?
I'll be quick. So I have like 2 points, I guess. The first one is I think and thank you for opening up to the more global sort of aspect rather than being very Eurocentric in this perspective, because at the end of the day, sustainability is a global issue. And in that respect, I think we also shouldn't underestimate young talent and youthful activism, because if there's one generation that is extremely first concerned by this issue and also is extremely aware of it, it's the young people who are at university or not at university. And we need to make sure that we involve these young people, we involve the people who are currently suffering already from the results of climate change, so people in the global south, underrepresented groups as well, because you're talking about sort of intersectional designs at the end of the day, and it's something that young people are really aware of, and I think also involving people in this respect is really important. And my second point is on interdisciplinarity, and that was already touched upon by Saija as well, that it's extremely important if you're talking about an innovation for the purpose and the well-being of the planet and society, that you need to make sure that not only the technology works, but that it works for people, and so that an engineer actually knows the ethical implications, the social implications of whatever they're creating. So creating interdisciplinary teams and teaching in an interdisciplinary way, challenge-based and so on, is really important.
Yeah. So that's very important what you just said, and it links perfectly with what Hélène also commented previously on. We seem to have lost the notion that a company, when it is created, is to actually fulfill a need, but it's not. It's to make profit. Right. So that there's this. We're not going to get into that ideological discussion, but Muriel, please go on.
Maybe to answer your question on reskilling and skilling, I think what people have to understand is that applied research institutes, which are members of EARTO, have dual roles. So we are not academia, so we are not part of the university alliances, which I think are only looking at universities, so it's already not ecosystem, it's ecosystem between universities, which I think is already maybe one level too low if you're talking about ecosystem. It's just network between similar organizations, and that's a pity that it doesn't go more towards maybe ecosystem thinking. And with the AR hubs, maybe another millefeuille again. Is that so necessary? I'm not sure. So just dropping those ones in the middle. For the reskilling, an EARTO does not provide diplomas. However, we are hosting thousands of PhD students, some that we will hire, some that we are preparing to be hired by the industry we're working with, because they are working in projects for industry when they are doing their PhD in an EARTO. what we are also seeing is that RTOs are losing and giving, in a way, a lot of their skills to industry. So industry is actually hiring a lot of our personnel, which sometimes for us makes it difficult at the moment to maintain. And when I ask my members, what can Europe do for to help you, they say, well, it's public money we're receiving, so we have some limitations sometime on the salaries we can give, and we cannot pay as good as the industry. Don't think Europe can give us more money to pay the researcher better, so we compete better with the industry, not really feasible. Meaning that we have to maintain a high level of skills, a very high level of knowledge also in our technicians, not only the researchers, while we are preparing with the universities next to us the future masters and so the future line of PhDs that we will need for managing our future infrastructure, name it an example, quantum. I had my president in VTT discussing with the university next door for a new master on quantum because they will need PhD to be able to run the future quantum computer that they have in-house that nobody yet know because we are creating this computer, right? So you're going very long tail in planning the need that you need to have in your RTO that then later you know you will give out kindly to the industry next door, sometimes with a bit of pain in the heart to see some of the researcher and some of your capabilities move into industry, but that is the role also of RTOs. And so the job of HR are very complicated in that ecosystem thinking for RTOs. And I think what Europe should look like, or should look at, the career of researcher for us, the proposal of the Commission at the moment is based on thinking that the researcher is hired in the university. So it's already not the RTO model. It's about PhD, associate professor, or postdoc, associate professor, professorship. That doesn't work like this in RTOs, and we have hundreds, thousands of researchers. We've made paper on what Commission could do and why it could be done is in DG Employ in some of the regulation to make sure that when we apply regulation that also applies to industry, we can be flexible and avoid hindrance and delay, and especially when you are thinking, for example, if ASML needs 250 new researcher on microelectronics in IMEC, maybe we need to move people from other places of Europe. Today it's going to be very difficult to do that.
Okay.
So a lot of more complicated story on HR than what we see at the moment being looked at, and very focused on university, and that's very narrow.
We are already beyond our time, so what I'm going to ask, but we could continue for another 2 hours as far as I can see, but what I'm going to ask everyone at the table, and only for those that want to say it, with a future-oriented perspective, what is the success story you would like to be telling in 2034? Which is when the FP10 will finish, by the way. Okay. Muriel, let's start with you.
To have a full-fledged program on technology infrastructure that actually managed to launch real discussion on the tech infra we need on the control points, on some very key industrial value chains that we already identified for Europe.
Very good, very concrete. Thank you.
Okay, from my side, the biggest gap that we see is this gap between the learning space and the scaling space. So if we, by 2034, can have resolved that, and that's a lot to do with the innovation ecosystems, there's a lot to do with the funding and finance that sit behind it, and bringing the different instruments in particular around blended finance, then if we can solve that learning to scaling, we can go a long way towards getting to the net zero.
Thank you. Saija, keep it very short, all of you.
We would have achieved a shift in mindset globally where environmental awareness would be integrated into the thinking of people as their fundamental cultural value and an asset.
I don't know which one of you is more ambitious, but I think you're winning so far.
I would like to see an ecosystem that is dynamic, global in perspective, and varied It's not the same everywhere.
Diversity in unity. That's very EU. Okay, so any more suggestions that you would like to see in 2034? Ah, okay, very good. Because I'm not... Wim?
I'd like to complement the words of Muriel, adding that, and picking on what Doris was saying, on adding the importance of the orchestration of the investments and hoping they will land on the places where the heavy points of the competences and the needs are, and not in the places which statistically fall in categories where the synergy discussion is more relevant, but of course on the condition of full access for everybody from the whole European Union. That must be clear. But that we have the critical mass and the business case, which has been discussed so much, and so we can also scale up the many startups on net zero objectives that we have in the region.
That would be a lot to unpack there. Doris, Louise, I jumped you because you.
Just one single sentence, then that maybe we start to stop competing with each other and start working together globally.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah, I cannot but remind that in 2034 we must have achieved the 2030 objectives, and we must be really on a pathway towards net zero, which means that I would hope and expect that a lot of the research which we have invested in, where we are using the current ecosystems, is actually implemented. And that we have a clearer picture, thanks to the ecosystems and the tools, and so for how it goes towards net zero in a global context as well, but with Europe leading.
Thank you. Hélène?
Yeah, I would have a dream that in 2034, we'll be very old at that moment, but in 2034, Europe has gained competitiveness in a way that it could help the rest of the world to become more adjusted with our EU values.
Very interesting. Mar?
Yes, thank you. I still have this sense of urgency. So what I would wish in 2034 would be that this concept of ecosystem that is so successful everywhere in Europe, I mean, north, south regions, they all have very successful, they become quicker. And that means that, this time between lab and fab becomes shorter. So we really become, we have in hands true solutions. So I think speeding up that has to be part of all these ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mar. Francesco, to finish.
One sentence, perhaps the industrial transformation that we are going inevitably to face, hopefully will leave no place behind.
Thank you very much. And I'm asked to close the session about 20 minutes ago, and also to remind you all that it resumes at 9:30 tomorrow morning, same place, same food. Enjoy.
Thank you for coming.